In 1984, Etta James was not the name at the center of the music industry's attention. She had been, in the early 1960s, one of the defining voices of rhythm and blues, a Chess Records artist whose recordings had shaped the sound of the era, whose live performances had built a reputation on the circuit that musicians carried and discussed for years. By the early 1970s, the moment had moved. The music industry moved with it, as it always did. By 1984, the word most commonly attached to Etta James in the music industry was not iconic or legendary. The word was comeback. And comeback was a word that carried its own ambivalence, its own implication that what was coming back had been, in some meaningful sense, gone. The Grammy Awards that year were the center of the industry's attention in the way they always were. The nominees, the frontrunners, the ceremony, the parties and events surrounding the ceremony, these were the landscape of the music business in the week of the Grammys. And the landscape was crowded with the people currently at the center of what the industry was about. Etta James was not among the nominees. She was at an event that occupied the margins of Grammy Week, not the ceremony, not one of the major parties, but the kind of gathering that Grammy Week produced in its peripheral zones. An industry event at a venue whose size suggested it had been arranged for a crowd not expected to be large. The people in the room were music industry professionals, A&R people, producers, managers, journalists, the infrastructure of a business filling time between its major events. They knew who she was. Many of them had not seen her perform in years. Some of the younger ones had not seen her perform at all. She was scheduled to perform a few songs. The event did not have the formal structure of a concert. It was background music for a gathering. The people present were doing the things that people at industry gatherings did when music was background music. The specific quality of collective attention that a room produces when it has been claimed. The absence of movement. The presence of stillness. The sense of people redirecting their entire physical awareness toward a single point was in the room. The conversations had stopped. The people who had been standing were no longer moving. A producer who had been there, who had been in the industry for 20 years and had been at many events during many Grammy weeks, said afterward that he had not seen a room change like that in a long time. Not at a Grammy event, not at any event where the music was supposed to be background. He said the room changed the way rooms changed at the Apollo Theater, which was a specific comparison from someone who knew what both rooms were. The people who had forgotten that Etta James was still performing did not forget it after that night. The people who had classified her as a historical figure, as someone important to the record rather than to the present, revised that classification. Not because of any formal announcement or critical reassessment, because they had been in a room where the revision was not optional. They had heard the thing itself. And the thing itself did not leave room for the comfortable historical classification. What they had heard was not a comeback. It was not a demonstration that she was still capable of what she had once been capable of. It was a demonstration that the capacity had never left, that the years of absence from the center of the industry's attention had not touched what she was at a microphone. The voice was what it had always been. The presence was what it had always been. She began with, "At last." The room was not prepared. Not because the room had failed to prepare. It was a gathering, not a concert. And the distinction between the two was that gatherings did not require the state of readiness that concerts required. People were standing, talking, holding drinks, doing the things that people at industry gatherings did when the music was background music. They were present in the way that people are present when they are in a room with music, rather than in a room for music. By the second verse, that distinction had collapsed. What happened in the room when Etta James sang "At Last" in 1984 was not something that anyone present would have predicted. The song was familiar, one of the most recognizable songs in popular music, a song that had been recorded and covered and played in more contexts than could easily be counted. The song was known. The singer was known. The expectation would have been a pleasant professional performance, well received in the way that professional performances by established artists were well received, with the appreciation of people who understood what they were hearing. What they received was not an approximation of the song or a professional performance of it. What they received was the song in the form that the song originally was, given by the voice that had given it that form, in a room that had not been prepared to receive it at that level. The room stopped. Not immediately. It took a verse. It took the arrival of the voice in the parts of the song that required the voice to be fully present. But by the bridge, the room had completed the transition. The Grammy week continued. The ceremony happened, and the awards were given, and the industry moved on to the next event, and the next priority, and the next name that was central to the current moment. Etta James did not receive an award that year. She was not at the center of the week's attention. But the people who had been in that room carried what they had heard. They had been in a gathering where the music was supposed to be background, and the music had not been background. And the difference between what they had expected and what they had received was a measure of exactly what Etta James was, a performer who did not become background. Who was the thing itself, regardless of what the room had expected, regardless of what the industry had classified her as, regardless of where the current moment had placed her in its hierarchy. She sang "At Last" in 1984 in a small room in Grammy Week, and the room stopped. That was all, and it was sufficient. In the years that followed, Etta James's career underwent the reassessment that this kind of moment makes inevitable over time. Critics returned to the recordings. Younger artists cited her as an influence. She recorded again, recorded well, and performed again, and the rooms she performed in responded the way they had always responded. The industry found new language for what she was, not a comeback, not a historical artifact, but a performer who had been performing at the same level across the decades that the industry had been looking elsewhere. The small room in Grammy Week 1984 was one of the moments when that understanding became unavoidable. For the people who were there, for the people who heard what the room stopped for. She sang "At Last." The room stopped. And the people who were in it, music industry professionals who had been between their obligations, who had not come for a concert, carried what they heard out of that room and into everything that came after. Because what they heard was not background. It was never background. It was Etta James.